Tonight on Nightline, the power broker. He's the colorful congressman conservatives love to hate. Now he's controlling the government purse strings. Meet Charlie Rangel, the hero of Harlem and the White House's new nemesis.
From the global resources of ABC News, with Terry Moran in Washington, Martin Bashir and Cynthia McFadden in New York City, this is Nightline, January 4th, 2007.
Good evening, I'm Terry Moran. What a day on Capitol Hill today, a day to take a moment, whatever your political persuasion, and just admire the peaceful way Americans transfer enormous amounts of power. The Democrats formally took control of the Congress. And of course, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi became the first woman Speaker of the House. She pledged to act with bipartisanship. So did almost everyone else. Almost. Tonight we're going to focus on another groundbreaking power player in the new Congress, Congressman Charles Rangel, who represents Harlem in New York. He's the first black man to become chairman of the powerful Ways and Means Committee, which has vast control over taxes, trade, Social Security. He's also a committed liberal and a fierce, outspoken critic of the Bush administration. He's a man to watch for sure, and Nightline's John Donvan profiles him tonight.
In broad daylight this morning, despite the applause of well-wishers along the way, this was a conservative's nightmare. The sight of Charlie Rangel heading to the U.S. Capitol for his swearing into Congress. And if you're not quite sure who Charlie Rangel is, well, spend a day in New York City on a Charlie Rangel tour of Harlem, because they know who he is.
I got his back, man. I got his back.
They all know.
Hey there, how you been? Good to see you. Still at the church? Oh, yeah. Is there anybody you don't know? You want to go in there and meet some of the nuns? Thank you so much, sister.
One of the most powerful men in Washington.
Yeah,
Yes,
I have to impress President Bush about that. Hey, buddy. How you doing? Have a good New Year. Hi, Happy New Year. Thank you.
Rock star.
Happy New Year.
They also know the two new key phrases in Rangel world, which are Mr. Chairman,
How you doing, my buddy? Good to see you.
and Ways and Means.
Ways and Means. All right there.
Yes, Ways and Means, which does not exactly trip off the tongue.
I remember before the election, someone brought their grandson to me and said, "Son, grandson, I want you to shake the hand of a man that could be the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee." And the grandson shook my hand and said, "Grandpop, what is the Ways and Means Committee?" And he looked at his son. He says, "Grandson, I don't really know, but I can tell you this, it's awesome."
Mr. Chairman.
So since it's not necessarily obvious, though awesome, here's Ways and Means in 20 seconds. Inside the House of Representatives, where the real lawmaking work gets done by committees of congressmen and women, it is the most powerful one of all, because its chairmen, going back over 2 centuries, have controlled the writing of laws about money, which nowadays primarily means Social Security, Medicare, and above all, taxes.
I think probably the average casual observer of the American political system doesn't really know what the Ways and Means Committee is. And now it seems as though in this district they do.
They know how many times I've missed becoming the chairman of the Ways and Means
Just by
Committee.
that much.
They know how many times he missed it, so I guess they say, "We got it this time, haven't we, Mr. Chairman?"
Rangel had served on the committee for years, but now becomes the first African-American man ever to chair it, and perhaps more important right now, the first Democrat to do so in 12 years, which means, he says,
Social Security will not be privatized. Medicare will not be spun off from a federal responsibility. And there will be hearings on this war. Hearings on where we are, how we got there, and where we're going to go from here.
That last point, he meant that's what the Democrats will do in power, not his committee. But now you see why last fall Republicans used the word Rangel to scare people.
If, in fact, Democrats were to take control of the Congress, Charlie Rangel takes over tax policy, I think, in fact, you would see a major tax increase.
Cheney and Rangel actually have kind of a verbal feud going on the past few years. There's this.
Charlie doesn't understand how the economy works.
And this.
I would like to believe that he's sick rather than just mean and evil.
And there's more. Rangel calling Cheney a son of a bitch in print. Cheney charging on the Rush Limbaugh show.
Charlie's losing it.
You take on Charlie Rangel, who's considered one of Washington's better debaters, and you're taking on not exactly a street fighter, but a guy who knew the streets growing up in the 1930s and 40s. He did literally serve as an altar boy at the nearby Catholic church, but he had another group of friends.
Down here were the roughest guys in the world in every gang that was there in the block I lived with. How in the hell a hoodlum like me could be an altar boy and a hoodlum at the same time, I don't know.
A hoodlum and a high school dropout. So, no, Rangel is not the slightest bit nostalgic about those days.
Oh, I'll be the last one to tell you that I miss the good old days. When people said, what the hell motivated you? I can say, get the hell out to where I was. I survived it. I survived it. A lot of people didn't.
He survived because the teenage Charlie, on a lark, joined the Army in time for the Korean War, where he was wounded and decorated for heroism. Then, after floundering for a while in civilian life, something finally clicked. He went and got his high school diploma, he went to college, he went to law school, and then he went to work as a U.S. attorney. All of this in the space of 8 years.
Make me look like a big shot.
His political life began not long after that. His first rally held here in the upstairs room of this Harlem funeral home.
Where were the deceased?
In the back with the screens there.
But it got him rolling. A few years in the New York State Assembly, and then his election to Congress in 1970, and then 36 years go by until this morning, heading for the Capitol. As we said, a conservative nightmare.
So what changes now that you are the chairman?
The hemorrhage stops. Some people say, but what are you going to do? I say, if you see something that you love dying, before you can decide what you got to do in an affirmative way, you know that no more harm is going to be done.
Which is shorthand for a lot of things. Opposition to the war in Iraq, for example, which is why he called for a reestablishment of the military draft. He also opposes tax cuts for the wealthy, though he wants to lighten the burden on some middle-class taxpayers. Not that he's showing his hand on how.
Where are you going to get the money from?
Damn right, that's a good question. That's why I'm the chairman. I have to call the committee together and say, hey, we made a commitment. Where are we going to get the money?
What are your thoughts on where to get the money from?
Well, it wouldn't be fair to my colleagues on the committee for me to share my thoughts because I have to find out what their thinking is. Hey.
Back home in Harlem, Rangel gives you the sense of being able to deal with anybody. The Muslim immigrants from Africa who run their own street market, the Jewish constituent who phoned, inviting the congressman to his daughter's bat mitzvah.
Stanley, I know I have to be in Washington, but my heart will be there.
He's got black support, he's got white support, but it's all pretty much liberal support. That's New York.
And I don't think I've ever gotten below 92% of the vote.
Actually, last time it was 94%.
There's no Democratic way to simplify the tax code. There's too much pain in it. There's no Republican way. You can only do that in a bipartisan way.
We'll see. But what about that Dick Cheney thing? How does he get past that, and does he even want to?
For him to act as though he was vice president and had some special knowledge of how to cause our economy to thrive and raise the quality of life, I said, you son of a bitch, which I shouldn't have said. And I apologized to his wife and almost apologized to him.
And you're going to get around to that someday?
Oh, of course. Next time I see him, I wish I hadn't said that publicly.
A footnote here, Rangel, who was sworn into Congress for the 19th time today, now as chairman of Ways and Means, gets to take back the ornate Capitol office that the Republicans had given to Vice President Cheney. Rangel in, Cheney out. Meanwhile, when our camera was following Rangel the other day through the Capitol, he stepped through this doorway and the applause that broke out from all of the other newly empowered Democrats who will be chairing committees It felt a little bit tongue-in-cheek if you were standing there, like they were ribbing him a bit for having a camera along, but it was also respectful and affectionate for a man who has served in Congress longer than almost all of them and is finally getting his gavel. I'm John Donvan for Nightline in Washington.
Charlie Rangel, a man with the ways and means to wield a lot of power here in Washington.